Trump is, yes, he's broken through with his ability to constantly lie, constantly denounce, spread theories, everything, fake news. He started it. He's got that. He's great New York communicator. The country was not used to that, and he can whip up a room. I mean, we talked about the other candidates. I don't know. I thought about it just the other day. Is J.D. Vance really going to be texting at 1 a.m. in the morning? Will Marco Rubio really be as bad as Trump? I wouldn't say there's hope. I mean, I think Trump, maybe for the good, has changed how we listen to our politicians or what they're saying. When I hear the Democrats say, well, what we want to do is review the policy, they lose me now within 3 seconds.
Welcome to another edition of SOS America. I'm your host, Charles Feldman. Thank you for joining us, for watching or listening, wherever you happen to be. We've been doing this now. Wow. It's almost a year, if you believe it or not. We started it last summer, and we're about to hit on another summer. And of course, this is a podcast appropriately named, I think, SOS America. It's about trying to understand exactly what is happening in this country now. Initially, and I've said this many times before, initially the idea was to help explain America and what's going on here to people who are outside the United States. And as it turns out, and I guess I should have realized that from the get-go. As it turns out, there are equal numbers of Americans who are trying to figure out what the hell is going on here. So we're all in on this together. We've spoken with many experts across many fields in the past almost year. And we have another expert with us today on this episode, who is somebody who was a former colleague of mine at CNN for many years. I was there for about 20, but Richard Roth was there for a lot longer than that. In fact, Richard claims to be maybe the oldest, and I don't mean that, well, maybe I do mean that chronologically in age, but he also claims to be having been at CNN longer than any other employee. Richard, is that right?
Yes, and I'm looking older as I see myself here. I don't look in the mirror that much, but yes, I think I'm the longest serving at one time. Someone could pass me perhaps in a year or two. I'm not sure.
So that's like what, 40 some odd
Yeah, I
years?
was there 44 years and 9 months.
You got it down to the 9 months, 44 years and 9 months, which is really very impressive. And you were largely at the United Nations for how many years? About 30 of those years, maybe more?
Yeah, 31, 32. Again, hard to believe. And, I loved news when we started CNN. I still loved it. And when you're doing it, especially if you're at a beat like the UN, we had a half-hour show at the end of the week. The days, it just flies by. Thank God. I'm not going to ever complain about my career.
But you also covered a lot of very noteworthy events outside the UN around the world, like?
Yes, like in that great period there, 89 and 91, the fall of the Berlin Wall, the Tiananmen Square crackdown in China, revolution in Czechoslovakia, Romania, and then the first Gulf War, being in Tel Aviv when, CNN, its most dramatic moment when we covered the beginning of the Gulf War live.
All right. So a very impressive background and a very impressive career at that. So, Richard, thank you for being with us on this episode of SOS America. I want to start off with the UN because you were there for so many years. I was there for about a year during the first Gulf War, probably because you were off to where were you were? I forgot. Did you say you were in Baghdad? I forgot.
Yes, and when I was in Amman, I could see you occasionally and Jeannie Most doing the UN beat, the Security Council approving
Yes,
resolution for the
right.
war to start.
So that leads me to this line of questioning to start off. as we find ourselves in a world with the United States at war with Iran, Russia has been at war for several years now with Ukraine. Over the years, there have been many of these conflicts. And I remember when I was sitting in the UN for that roughly 1 year period, wondering why the UN wasn't more effective in stopping these conflicts, because that was the whole idea of having the United Nations to begin with, was to try to bring world peace. It hasn't really worked out that way. And I'm curious from your perspective, somebody who had been there much longer than I had been there, why hasn't it worked out that way? Or do you think it has?
Well, it has stopped, or we haven't had the biggest goal of the UN, which was to prevent a third world war. As we know, the UN was founded after World War II. President Roosevelt, Winston Churchill talked about having a United Nations. I can only imagine the look on their faces if they saw the state of the world now. There would be no Potsdam conference or Yalta summit. I mean, when was the last time Putin, Xi, and Trump met together? I believe the answer is zero.
Yeah.
The UN also is established more for peacekeeping rather than peacemaking. But of course, as we've seen, who's making the peace now? There's no independent arbiter. And when I was covering the UN, occasionally a secretary general like a Kofi Annan, Javier Perez de Cuellar, they would travel. I remember being in Amman and Amman, Jordan, and Javier Perez de Cuellar came there in a bid to try to settle things between Iraq and the U.S. And Kofi Annan went to Iraq to and Libya even at different points. And there was actually hopes that something would be accomplished. The current Secretary General Javier Perez, excuse me, Antonio Guterres of Portugal, is never going to happen with him. I mean, I think he offers and they say don't even bother. So yes, the UN has changed, but also, could you really have success when you have 193, let's say, board members, 193 countries, and come up with a resolution? Of course, there are the big powers on the Security Council. It's like they now use the UN, some say, as a scapegoat. When they use it when they want it, it's there for countries to talk. Some countries really count on the UN and they feel like speaking at the Security Council, they're getting their voice out. I've often said for decades, if the UN was a private company, it would have been taken over by another larger company that would make more efficient changes. Trump administration trying to do what many other US administrations have said and partially accomplished. They're gutting the funding for various UN agencies.
Do you think, though, that there is a an institutional problem with the way the UN was structured to begin with? Because you mentioned just briefly in passing the Security Council, and for any big things like trying to arrange something between, say, Russia and Ukraine, or between the U.S. and Israel and Iran, you have this situation in the Security Council where relatively few countries of the world have veto power. And, you know, I was going to say the Soviet Union, that's how far back I go. Russia, the US, China, right? They all can, and they do, consistently veto things. So is there a structural problem that perhaps the founders of the UN didn't anticipate, or maybe didn't appreciate enough?
I don't know. I think they probably like the fact that the big powers, the people who won World War II, could veto something. Now, maybe it has gotten out of hand. Huge move by France, a permanent member with a veto, France and others to change the veto system, either to do away with it completely. And for decades, they are trying to, quote, expand the UN Security Council to put, instead of 15 countries now, up to 21. But they have been talking about this since 1993. I went to a meeting, a private meeting, and they're still going at it. It's the one story, if I saw an article about it, I would read for 2 seconds and throw it in the garbage pail because I knew it wasn't happening. Uh, Yes, the UN shape, look at how the world changed. I mean, you don't have the representation of the African countries, but when Italy wanted it, then Germany said no. And Pakistan wanted to stop India, India stops Pakistan. And also, the council seems to be set up for these big country spheres of influence. Russia will veto anything on Ukraine. The US will veto anything on Israel. China will veto anything about Tibet or something like that. God forbid we have an attack on Taiwan by China or a bigger attack. I think the Security Council would just not be the relevance is what I'm saying. That's the magic word for decades also. Is the UN relevant now? I don't think so. You wouldn't believe how many meetings of the Security Council happened on Ukraine and the Middle East. I mean, you're never going to get attention for it, but these ambassadors, it's their job. They're told, here's your speech. You could save so much time and money by cutting down the number of meetings, which was the way it was in the 50s and 60s. The Security Council didn't meet every day as it practically does
Hmm.
now.
But you know, I mentioned this on a previous episode of SOS America when you talk about the relevancy of the United Nations, and I'd mentioned that when I was an undergraduate, when I was in college, I had a course on the United Nations. Taught by, and I forgot the professor's name now, but he had been some official connected to the UN in his earlier life before he became an academic. And we all had to write papers about what our own impression was, having at the time read a lot about it, of the relevancy then of the United Nations. So we're talking quite a while back. And he got very upset with me because I had written a paper then where I said, I'm not quite sure what its relevancy was. Yes, I get your point, Richard, about there is a difference between peacemaking and peacekeeping. But that being said, I didn't even decades ago see how the UN was really preventing wider conflicts and why it wasn't doing that. And I remember he got a little upset, and I think I got a bad mark on the paper. But I'm going to dig my heels in on that. And if he were around today, because I'm pretty sure he's passed away by now, I would look him straight in the eye and I would say, I told you so. I was right. Was I?
I'd love to. Well, Utant is dead. I know he could have been your professor, the former Secretary General.
No, it
No,
wasn't.
I
It
don't
wasn't. He wasn't
think.
that high up, but yeah, go ahead.
I don't know if were you in school in the New York City area of the
Yeah,
UN?
yeah, yes.
So you did not do what the rest of us did to have a tour of the UN with your
Oh no, no.
class?
I went to the UN. I had a tour of the UN when I was like in fourth grade. But this is now at the college level.
I just wanted to make sure the foundation of your argument. No, I don't think you were wrong, but people are scared like you may not need it, but that one time you need it, they feel it's worth it. But I agree, especially the last few years. I mean, I was accused half of the time by the anchor people who would throw to me for a live shot from the UN. Half of them thought I was a big cheerleader of the UN, and then half the time I felt I had to be on the other side because anybody who speaks in any positive way about an improvement, they were not happy. I had an anchor
Mhm.
person who I still remember. All she would always do is ask me after my live report, well, come on, Richard, well, what's the UN really good for? I mean, how can you answer that? They never
Yeah.
asked the Pentagon correspondent after a report about maybe an $80 billion toilet, what's the UN, what's the Pentagon good for? But the UN, oh, they love it's that easy. Every anchor, I mean, they think they're being so smart and innovative. They would say, Richard, but what is the UN really good? Hundreds of them, hundreds. So, and maybe they're on point. But the UN, if when you're there in the 90s, I thought, it was post-Cold War so, to a degree, and they really picked up the pace. I mean, the UN has helped smaller wars perhaps not happen between African countries or maybe an Asian border dispute. The UN will send a representative. The UN, what it does best, humanitarian aid. And many people think that's what the UN should then do. Forget about any of the political stuff. Just keep shipping stuff in as best as possible. Didn't see that in Gaza. I'm afraid we may see more places like that. The UN became the worst two letters in the world, around the
So,
world.
so we cannot look to the UN to resolve the Russia-Ukraine war or the U.S.-Israel-Iran war. Is that pretty much it?
Yes, you probably left out a few wars that Trump claims to have settled, but
Yes, well,
yeah, yeah. I mean, the Secretary General, how many statements can you put out that says the Secretary General is concerned about the launching of, the Secretary General is deeply concerned. I mean, you have to look for the words, but come on, what does it matter anymore? It depends on the person. As you may know, we could discuss this, the UN is choosing a new Secretary General later this year.
all right. Let me thank you. Let's move off the UN now. And I want to talk because you've been in the news business for a really long time. And before, by the way, before you began your very long career at CNN, just so that viewers and listeners know, what did you do before?
Yeah, I didn't just get off the boat in the Hudson River here. What did I do? Public School 184 in Queens.
Not that far back, not that far back.
I was at Channel 11 WPIX as a young desk assistant, and I was at AP Radio in Washington, another organization that has seen better times. And then when CNN started, I came back to New York and began with them. Our New York bureau was in the World Trade Center lobby, building number one.
Yes. Okay. All right. So that establishes your bona fides as a longtime member of the uh, press
Media.
corps. Media, thank you. Media. I was looking for a. Some people just hate that word, media. I don't know why, but media, because they can't figure out if it's a singular or a plural. But in
And
any
it
event,
came out of that mainstream media that is
yes. All right.
another easy target.
One of the things, not one of the things, a key thing that has changed over the years that both you and I have been in the news business is the attitude of a lot of Americans toward the news media. And I've talked about this on previous podcasts as well. If you go back to the days of post Watergate, people, some people anyway, worship the press. You had kids flocking to journalism schools, wanting to be investigative reporters like, Woodward and Bernstein, who certainly helped bring down the Nixon presidency. Uh, Now we find ourselves in a world where the president of the United States has firmly and repeatedly declared the press to be the enemy of the people. His words, not mine. What's changed?
I think, and I may be leaving something out, when Roger Ailes started, well, Murdoch started Fox News. I
You're
believe,
talking about Rupert Murdoch, so that people know.
yes, and I believe that Fox News, that channel, played the most important role in the changing of America and the hatred of the media, all of that. To have an opinion-based news network, other than a few hours during the day, pound away, similar to the Trump approach. You keep attack, 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 never give up. And they started it. You put a few blondes with short skirts. You condemn everything the Democrats are doing, and then it started. The chicken noodle news may have started before Fox, but Fox called it, yeah, the Clinton News Network. And little by little, people cared more about opinions rather than facts. My elderly neighbor in my apartment building, who has long since passed away, but she surprised me one day by saying, "Oh, I watch Fox." I go, "Why?" She said, "I like what they say about Israel." And
So,
I
so do you,
believe
yeah,
the
good.
opinions. Um, I'm going to maybe remember one or two other facts as to why. Maybe you can provoke me with that. Why the public started hating the media.
Well, I kind of agree with you that Fox is heavily, if not solely, but heavily responsible for the Fox News channel, because I don't think it really is a news channel. It is an opinion channel. Some would argue it's an arm of the Republican, now Trump party, because I'm not even sure the Republican Party exists anymore in its former form. It's really the party of Donald Trump, as he has repeatedly demonstrated by, pulling his weight and skewing, in effect, local elections by getting people who back him elected or voted for if it's a primary, and people who are, in his view, disloyal to him, booted out by voters. So I agree with you. I do think that Fox is largely responsible, which raises the interesting question. Um, do you think, if you had a way, which is more responsible for the current climate in America, which some have argued is sort of on the verge of, and I don't like to use the term civil war because that brings up images of, Confederate and Union soldiers, firing at each other across a battlefield, but a social civil war for sure, a political civil war, absolutely. Do you think, if you had to balance it, Fox News, the current president of the United States, Donald Trump, which one do you think is more responsible for creating that Civil War type climate?
Oh, I think it's Fox. Now, I'm not going to say there is
More
nothing.
than Trump, more than
Oh, I
Trump.
thought you were doing Fox versus CNN.
No, no,
Uh,
no, no.
well, Fox was there at the beginning, so I still almost would credit Fox, even though we have other networks that are even to the right of Fox. Trump is, I think, it was foaming already, these divisions. When you go back, I remember being so worried that, oh my God, Mitt Romney is leading in the election that night. Oh my, it seems like nothing. Uh, Trump is, yes, he's broken through with his ability to constantly lie, constantly denounce, spread theories, everything, fake news. He started it. He's got that. He's great New York communicator. The country was not used to that, and he can whip up a room. I mean, it's incredible. We'll see what happens if he ever gets a third term. Should he apply or lie, cheat, or steal? Fox was there. Trump just came in and he just loved, he saw an easy playing field to denounce, criticize anybody. Russia, witch hunt. I mean, everybody knows the words. 50 things about Trump. You don't know anything about Gavin Newsom. You don't know anything about Josh Shapiro. And as people have said, the Democrats can't run against Trump. Well, I think they still can, but the time's running out on that.
Do you think that all this talk from Trump and all the people around Trump about the press being the enemy of the people and all that, um, do you think that it can be repaired, this relationship between the press, the media, and the American population? Or have we reached a sort of point where it's just impossible to repair it, in which case the next question becomes, so now what?
I know. I've been thinking about that. I mean, I think Trump could easily win another term, no matter who he ran against, which is unbelievable when you think about it. Uh, I've
Well, he
thought
can't
about,
run for another
uh,
term, but I think you're talking
yeah,
about if
if
he
he
were
did,
able to. Yeah.
yeah. Uh, we talked about the other candidates. I don't know. I thought about it just the other day. Is J.D. Vance really going to be texting at 1 a.m. in the morning? Will Marco Rubio really be as bad as Trump? I wouldn't say there's hope, but if you get Trump off the stage, perhaps you can start. But as we know, most of the country's in the middle. It's the left and the right that get all the attention, demanding money, contributions. That's where the money goes. Nobody's in the middle. And if you're in the middle, you're seen by the right wing as soft and by the Democrats as not being willing to fight. Um, the country, I think, has still got a lot of apathy in it. It's really the stock market. As long as that's up and people are working generally, I'm not so sure we're headed for a civil war. But if somebody tries to imitate Trump, some of these other characters, you may have a situation where I don't know how you have a civil war in certain states where everybody's jammed together. I mean, is Iowa going to attack Chicago? I don't know. Sounds like an NCAA tournament.
The the um the current climate, though, in the United States, and again, part of the reason for this particular podcast is to try to explain what is going on, if anyone can, in the country in this period, point in time. Um, it seems to me, and maybe maybe I'm watching too much television or reading too many news articles, uh, that we've become maybe a more violent country. And yes, I know people are going to say, well, what about the Kennedy assassination for both John Kennedy and Robert Kennedy? What about Martin Luther King? Yes, I get all that. But it seems on a day-to-day basis, we have become a demonstrably more violent country. There isn't a day, it seems, that goes by where we don't, hear about some shooter involving multiple people in places that used to be considered sacrosanct, churches, schools, things like that. Um, do you think that is my perception based on reality, or am I getting suckered in by the sensationalist headlines of news organizations?
Well, I know locally in New York, other cities, the stats claim that the location is safer, that the crime rate is down, but people seem to be more scared than ever. Uh, Perhaps if you have a different president, maybe that person sets the tone or the mood. But I agree with you on what you just said there. The violence, you can't even, I don't want to remember them, but you can't even remember every shooter. I think at the beginning in the 90s after Columbine, you'd say, oh yeah, I know that name. Forget it. You wouldn't, nobody even remembers the name of the guy who tried to shoot Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania. I don't know if
Yeah.
that's good news or bad news, but oh, I mean, they don't do anything about guns. I'm not saying take away guns, just come up with a reasonable gun control, gun examination policy. But whether it's Trump not wanting a deal on immigration because he wanted to run against it on an issue, people hate both parties. And yet this still goes on. I still think a Republican and a Democrat could win on an independent ticket if they were good people, especially now.
If you had, I'm going to give you an opportunity for a couple of minutes to be president of the United States, whether you want to or not. You're now a non-elected, and who knows, maybe in the future that will happen. You are a non-elected president of the United States for a couple of minutes, Richard. If you had to deliver a State of the Union address, as all presidents do every year, what would you say is the current state of the union?
Does the First Lady come with that package deal? Oh, I'm sorry. Uh, yeah, what would I do? What would be the line?
What would you say? How would you describe the state of the union?
I'd say the State of the Union is shaky. And I mean, I think Trump, maybe for the good, has changed how we listen to our politicians or what they're saying. When I hear the Democrats say, well, what we want to do is review the policy, they lose me now within 3 seconds. I think it will take different kinds of candidates to break through now. The country doesn't want to hear what seems to be these talking points. And that's the beauty of Trump. I mean, he will tell you in 5 words off the cuff, he'll say, I don't care about the financial situation of the American people. So I would look forward to, in a State of the Union, well, if it's my
Yeah, it's
appearance
your
here,
state of the union.
yeah, it's shaky. And you would come up with 10 things like, I'm not going to, no more financial, no stock trading by the Congress, Uh, no buying the Pentagon's $500 million planes when drones are all what's being used now. I mean, there are things you could pitch if you put it out simply as in my presidency. I believe I would appoint you Secretary of the Interior, Charles. I don't know. Well, today, well, Trump has named the housing leader to be our national intelligence
Yes.
director. Uh, I would not do that in my administration. We would have unqualified people, but they would each hold a different position. Uh, so you've given me enormous powers, but
Yeah.
yes, I probably would go to the UN instead of waiting every September and talk to different countries. But we've had weak administrations. We've really had different presidents who have been flawed in different ways that they've lost the muscle of the office. They talk tough or they appear in Vanity Fair profiles. It's just not there. And we've given too much power to the presidents. I don't know if that'll be reversed. I would stop anybody who try to take away my power. Charles, back to you.
Let's circle back to the news media now. So we now in this country, in the world really, have this very fragmented environment, right? Younger people get a lot of their news from stuff online. They get it from, their phones. They get it from TikTok in 30-second, if that, chunks, Instagram, that kind of thing. What do you think, as somebody who's been in the news media for almost half a century, right? Well, probably you have hit that half century mark when you include all the stuff you did prior to CNN. What do we in the media need to do to get at least some sense of being grounded, the public that is, grounded back in reality instead of everybody having their own set of facts?
I love the question. I'm not sure there is a great answer because the linear television model is collapsing. So younger people have said they get their news from Instagram or X, Twitter. The lack of people watching linear news, which is not the greatest, but it's news at least, they're gone. And that is why every corporation, including CNN, about to be taken over by Paramount, and 60 Minutes hiring someone who had no news experience, but still they want to change the look. Uh, I'm almost forgetting your question, but
Well,
the media, the media,
how do we the question
yeah.
really, right now everybody is in their own silo, it seems to me, right? You've got some people are getting their news from TikTok, some are getting it from Instagram, some are getting it from God knows where. And everybody sort of has their own, it seems, set of facts. And so it isn't that we can't agree on an angle to a story. Should we cover this or cover that? We can't even agree on what the story is.
We never would have thought we'd be where we are during the years of Cronkite. That's Walter Cronkite for you listeners of CBS News. And maybe we can only hope that 20, 30 years from now, it will be different. Perhaps there will be a major attack or war or something that happened with 9/11. Uh, I can't be that much of a soothsayer, but it's the type of people we elect or the people we listen to. That's what it's going to take. I don't know if each party has somebody who can really communicate in a different way. It's hard to
Well,
believe the elections we had where Clinton got 2 terms, Bush got 2 terms, Obama got 2 terms, so they must have been liked at some point.
yeah, I wonder when it comes to media consolidation and power in this country and globally, if a lot of people realize just how concentrated this power is. You mentioned, CBS and 60 Minutes, which, if you're outside the United States, is probably the most successful, at least in this country, weekly news magazine show that's been going on for more than half a century. But Paramount, looks like it is about to, which owns CBS News, is apparently going to merge if it's approved by the government here, and Donald Trump doesn't interfere, and there's no reason to think that he would because Paramount is now owned by people who are ideologically aligned with President Trump. Um, that Paramount would, in the not too distant future, own CBS News, which is globally has been one of the more respected broadcast news operations going back to World War II, even before World War II. CNN, if the merger takes place, they would own CNN, a global news organization. Um, Also, a large share owner of TikTok, which is where, as I mentioned, a lot of kids, younger people get their news and information. That's an enormous amount of power, and not just over news, but remember, these are movie studios too. So it also affects popular culture. You don't get to know what movies are not being made and why they're not being made. They just don't show up in the screen. That's an enormous concentration of power. And I know that even when I got involved in the news business around the same time that you did, Richard, there was talk even then about, how few news organizations there were because this merger, sort of momentum was starting to gain some steam. But we now live in a world in this country where week after week, newspapers close. They're kind of a thing of the past. This consolidation of power. I can't imagine that's good, although the people who drive these mergers keep claiming that it is. Are we not seeing something that they're seeing? Are they visionaries and we are just Luddites?
Well, I think it's follow the money. Look, the American audiences know that, but Stephen Colbert, one of the more successful late night comics, his show was removed and it's owned by Paramount Skydance. Paramount said, I think it was losing $20 million, and they gave him at least 8 or 9 more months on the air. We don't know the real reason. What happened? He was a heavy Trump critic. ABC has defended Jimmy Kimmel. But yes, it would be horrible to have so few ownership. It's happening in the airlines. It's happening in every field I like. You keep losing independent or other voices. You remember Eastern Airlines? I mean, we've been watching what's happened with that industry with the television. How will Paramount deal with CNN? And Paramount, I believe they're using 49%, I think, of foreign overseas money. I'm hesitant to use the word foreign because Ted Turner banned the use
Yeah.
of foreign, but I'm using it now that Ted's gone, I guess. Uh, they're going to say, we don't like that story on Israel, or we want this. Where does the buck stop? Um, yes, that's what's happening. And they say consolidation.
Yeah, since you mentioned CNN again, would you be able to, in 2026, being the person and journalist that you are, Richard, would you be able to work in the current CNN environment?
I thought I could help with digital. I could do different stories. That's the only time in my CNN history I proposed me doing digital. I said, I have time, I can help. And this one executive, not Jeff Zucker, one executive I talked to, he said, I'll get back to you. Never heard from him. I don't think people ever understood me at CNN except a few people. But I don't think they would want me be, or in general, because of age, they want younger, cheap, and innovative. And of course, they get the field. I even left out, you corrected me, TikTok is that's where everybody's getting their images from. I don't even know if I want to be back at CNN. I hated the building there. Avoid that building. But in terms of the question that you did not ask, did anybody at CNN ever tell me what to say? I
Yeah.
just remember a very angry call from a Mr. Lou Dobbs, who was a financial anchor at CNN, who then did news and then was big on Fox and very
Yeah.
tight with Rob Rails and Trump. And it was during the oil for food scandal in 2004. And he said on the phone to me, I was at the UN, he said, I don't want any of this. He said, she said. And he hinted that if I did not comply, he would come over and I guess punch me out. I don't think he had, I don't think he had a credential to get in the building. But I think that's the only time that I remember being told by someone, those shows would like a piece a certain way. They never said, don't say this or don't say that. That was early Trump, you could say.
And do you think that that situation is worse now, or is likely to get worse? You think there are more of those "don't do this, don't do that" kind of thing?
Well, I'm eagerly awaiting to see, will Paramount suggest to Jake Tapper, we don't want to have as much criticism of Trump. Other CNN leaders have tried that, and I don't see any change and they're not exactly wrong, all of these CNN anchors. I mean, you could be accused of giving an opinion by just stating what Trump says. People may not believe it, but you're telling them. Uh, that is where it would be very interesting. I'm not sure what else can Paramount do. What are they going to do? Not pay for camera crews? All the camera crews do these days is set up for a live shot with a guest. We're a radio network. I shouldn't say we, but CNN and the others, it's all radio. And you mentioned about the fear of crime and what's happening every night. As you know, for 40 years, you tune into local news at 11 o'clock, it's going to be bad news. And I'm not
Yeah.
suggesting for great news, but it's, one person getting pushed in front of a subway train is awful. But then you think about how many millions ride the trains every day. I don't know, but they want fires, you know the deal. And local news hammers you every day. There's more people watch local news, I think, than even network news.
Do you
And
think
if
actually?
you may not have noticed, NBC, they're all having this good news. There's good news tonight, Tom Yamas, the anchor, will say, and he's grinning like a machine at the end of the show, which began, of course, with the deaths of millions, and at the end is when they've started this with this treacly music behind it. Awful, awful.
Well, that raises an interesting question, though. Do you think that all these decades of, and I agree with you about local news, it's the old "if it bleeds, it
Yeah,
leads" thing.
lead.
You know,
Yep, still.
yeah. But do you think that decades of Americans watching that stuff, night after night after night after night, during a time when people did watch, local television news, um, created this further? You were blaming Fox, and I don't disagree with that as laying the groundwork for someone like Donald Trump. But I wonder if it goes even farther back. If the night after night of being told that if you step outside, you're likely to be, killed, or if you deal with the business, you're likely to be ripped off, or whatever it is, it was always bad. That in fact was the beginnings of the road that eventually led to someone like Donald Trump, who is a New Yorker, as you pointed out, being in the White House.
I think so. I mean, Trump was around, of course, when crime was very bad in the 70s, and Giuliani has to be credited for whether civil rights were violated. I'm not sure, but the city did change, and you remember what it was like in Times Square. You couldn't walk down the block. You felt. I think psychologically it does have an impact, being pounded over the head. And statistics show the odds of you ever getting murdered or maimed or your apartment being on fire is almost nil. But, you put it in people's heads, and we have the video. The crews are never out at night. It's always freelance video now, or Citizen app or whatever. And if people knew how little video was shot by the station you're watching, once again, saving of money, using others' video, but and then I know here we are bashing television news. I mean, I'm sure you've noticed this. It's the dumbing of the country. The country is getting dumber, in my opinion, and TV is right there along with it. The male anchor lead maybe has to start a sentence, and then the female co-anchor has to do the next sentence. Why? You're never at a party, and Bob says, "Yes, 10% of my business is going downhill." Then the wife says, "And the reason is, come on," and that's still there.
But you know why that is? It's because by contract, these anchors are supposed to have equal amount of. I remember, and maybe we'll close on this quick story. When we both had worked at what you had mentioned, WPIX TV in New York. I had worked there also for a period in the late 70s, and our then anchors at the time had, by contract, they had to have an equal number of lines that they could say on the air. And there was a male and male anchor. I won't bother mentioning who they were at the time. They're both now deceased. But I remember there were arguments almost nightly with the news director, because one of the anchors would always finish the show by saying, the so-and-so, she had more lines than I did. And she would say, no, last night you had more lines. And that was the reason why, when the writers would write the scripts, they would divide everything, trying as best they could to make sure there was equal distribution among the anchors. It was ridiculous then. It is equally ridiculous.
Wow, I was not thinking of that, but that means every station is like that. I mean, every contract written, they couldn't by now say, we're not counting your words, but you did get to see a fight or two about it, but it's on every local station. And then, of
Yeah.
course, the reporter has to turn around still and say, the fire that occurred right next to that, I mean, and NBC, more and more on the network news, they're saying, take a look at this. It's all designed like we know you don't want to pay attention to just facts. We have to jazz it up. So we're going to tell you to look at the video that you're already watching. Or when they
Right.
say, Bob joins us in the studio now live, we see that. It's all for the done.
On that note, Richard Roth, really fun and interesting, as it always is, to talk with you.
Well,
Thank
thank
you.
you, Charles, and thank you. It's good to see you. I know you were in New York recently. You didn't call, but we'll still do your request.
It was very brief. It was very brief. Next time, I promise. For those of you, again, who have been watching or listening to SOS America, as always, we welcome your comments. If you would like to subscribe, it is absolutely free, unlike a lot of things you would have to buy in America. This thing is free, so we urge you to subscribe as well. Until the next time, for SOS America, I'm Charles Feldman. Thanks.